And today guys, we're going to be making some really delicious pork loin steaks with some caramelized apple and a creamy brandy sauce. This is a really simple dish to make, but really delicious. A really great date night dish, tastes like it should come straight out of a restaurant. And so for our pork dish, we're going to need some pork loin steaks. We're going to need an apple. We need some shallots, we're going to need some brandy, we're going to need some double cream, we need some unsalted butter, we need a nice bunch of rosemary, we need some whole grain mustard, and we need some sugar. And so the first step for this dish is just a little bit of preparation. And so the first thing I like to do is take my apple, and we just want to chop our apple into nice sized cubes. Not too big, not too small, but you don't have to be too precious about this. Roughly 1-inch sized cubes. So use a very sharp knife, of course, and chop up your apple into cubes. Once you've diced up your apple, chuck that into a bowl and stick it to one side, ready to cook. And next we want to prepare our shallots. So take your shallots, and first of all we want to chop them in half and remove the skins. Once you've done this, we want to dice up our shallots really nice and fine. Get them as fine as you can for this recipe. Once you've got your diced shallots, you can always chop through them 1 or 2 times with a knife just to get them really nice and fine, as we want them to cook quite quickly. Now, once we have our shallots and our apple to one side, we're ready to cook, guys. So take a frying pan, pop the heat to medium, chuck some butter into the pan, chuck in your apple, and we want to soften and caramelize our apple. Give the apple a touch of seasoning and keep stirring them through for a few minutes until they start to get nice and soft. Once your apples are getting nice and soft, we want to sprinkle them in some sugar. Add another touch of butter if you need, stir them through, and they'll start to beautifully caramelize. Once your apples are really nice and soft and perfectly caramelized, just pop them to one side while we fry off our pork loin steaks. So take another frying pan, and then we want to season our pork steaks nice and generously with sea salt and black pepper. Turn the heat up to high, add a nice splash of olive oil, and then lay them into the pan. We want them to instantly have a really good strong sizzle as soon as they go in. We want the pan nice and hot. We want to give them about 3 or 4 minutes on each side, depending on the size. As soon as you've caramelized one side of your pork steak, chuck in some rosemary and chuck in a nice generous knob of butter. Fry them off on both sides, turn them a couple of times, give them a prod, and pork steaks of this size that I'm using here take about 3 or 4 minutes on each side. After a few minutes, the most important part is to allow our pork steaks to rest. So take them out of the pan, pop them onto a chopping board, quickly clean out our pan, return it back to the heat, turn the heat down to medium, add a nice splash of olive oil, chuck in another little bunch of rosemary, and chuck in your shallots and a touch of butter. And we want to beautifully sweat down our shallots. We don't really want a great deal of colour on them. They'll only take a couple of minutes. We want them to be beautifully soft and sweet. And then we want to season, and once your shallots are really nice and sweated down, we want to go in with a teaspoon or 2 of whole grain mustard. Stir the mustard through, and then we want to deglaze the pan with a really nice generous splash of our brandy. Burn off the alcohol, give it a couple of minutes, and the brandy will become nice and sticky and thick, almost like a caramel. And then we want to pour in some double cream. Use as much as you like, but the sauce will thicken over the next minute or 2. Stir that through, and then we want to chuck back in our pork steaks just for about 30 seconds, and most importantly, pour in all of the pan juices from the resting steaks. Stir that through, and now we're ready to serve. Pop the apples back onto the heat for about 30 seconds to a minute just to get them back up to temperature, and then we're ready to serve. So place your pork loin steaks onto a plate, and then pour over some of our creamy brandy sauce, and then finish with some chunks of our beautiful caramelized apple. And there we have a really indulgent and delicious dish, but as you can see, incredibly easy to make, but restaurant quality. My delicious pork loin steaks with caramelized apple and a creamy brandy sauce. Give this one a try, you're gonna absolutely love it, guys.